Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of season 2 of our podcast, Law That Leads. I am so happy to have Mina here with us today. She has one of the most dynamic backgrounds that you will ever hear. Even though she's a real estate agent now, she has a master's in immigration and settlement studies, which makes her the perfect person to help newcomers and first-time home buyers with their first purchase of their home and, in a new country and all the other factors that you have to consider. She also has a background in legal studies, which makes my job a little bit easier because Mina will mention certain words or certain things to her clients and, they're better prepared. And finally, which is something we have in common, Mina was also a public servant, just like myself, a very long time ago with the provincial government. So she has a lot of experience with coordination, policy analysis. So all of these new rules coming up and things like that, she's able to, look at them and digest them from a different lens. And finally, the one thing that I think people gravitate towards you the most is about your Instagram reels. You are so real. It's so organic that I think people just naturally gravitate towards, and it's one of those accounts that you just love to follow just because you're getting real information in real time. So without further ado, welcome, Mina, and thank you for being here today.
That was a wonderful introduction.
Thank you. True.
I also didn't know that you were also a public servant, so
ready?
Happy to be here.
So tell us, with your dynamic background, why real estate?
Great question. Okay, so there's a two-part answer to this. Yes. Basically, I have a friend, she's a really good friend of mine. She's also a realtor. She was also in the government with me. Oh. And she has a couple of investment properties, and that's why she got her license. And she was like, go get your license. And I'm like, listen, let me, I know I'm on the path towards entrepreneurship. This is definitely something that I see myself doing. I just want to make sure I'm actually providing value, right?
Right.
Because I get the answer for a lot of people is also the money, which is great. But it's also the money that you get is fulfilling to a degree based on the value that you provide. So That's really how the trade-off goes, right? No value, you're not really making a dime. Based on my background, just all of the public service roles that I've done, a lot of problem solving, fast-paced environments, worked with a ton of stakeholders, did so much project management. And then I was also in the Ministry of Environment. So I got the ins and outs of, zoning bylaws, noise regulations, conservation authorities, what are the land regulations, air regulations. There's so much that goes into just learning about the policies behind the scenes as well. It was a very seamless transition into real estate for me because I knew that I wanted to enter into my own entrepreneurial role, and that just felt like a good fit. So now the second part of that answer is, where's my purpose coming from? Why towards real estate? Why not something else within the same type of industry, right? Why not project management, running investment properties, for example? So my dad had a really, really bad experience with his agent when we were younger. Decades ago. It was his first home. We were immigrants. He wasn't working a great job, but he saved up enough to provide for his family. And this agent took complete advantage of my dad. Yeah, it was, I can't even tell you, there were just so many problems in the home that we didn't know of. He didn't guide my dad in terms of what his rights were, what should go in the contract, simple clauses and conditions that you write. None of that was there. We get into the house, and turns out the owner left everything in the house, including a gun under the bed. Yes. And her wigs in the closet, and just everything was there. So we had to clean up that whole house prior to moving in. And we thought that's what people do when they move in. We thought that was normal. And then that house caused so many fights in the family because of all these issues that we saw coming up, and we didn't have the money to repair them right away. So I see the struggles that families can go through. And it's not just about the purchase immediately, it's about the long-term effects of that purchase. So funnily enough, you mentioned immigration and my background in immigration. A lot of my first-time home buyers are newcomers. And I just see my dad in them. And I see my family in them. And I'm like, I'm going to take care of you because nobody is going through what my family went through.
I honestly resonate to that so much.
Yeah.
I feel, when you've been here for so long, you must have one of those immigrant stories as to why it's your why on what you're doing. My parents had a similar experience, but with condos. So condos is, I guess, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about educating is exactly that. My parents had a very bad experience. They were told the whole way that this is a condo. It ended up being a life lease, wasn't even a condo. Went into receivership, all of that. The project was done. There was so many aspects to it that, like you said, you just probably need 3 weeks to talk about. So, and then my first property was also a condominium, and I ended up being on the board, and then that was sort of my start. So I guess, yeah, now that you're sharing your story, it kind of makes me think about mine and why I'm so passionate about it. It's just unfortunate that, when it comes to the condominium law side of things, you're most likely going to be in condominium governance. So it's more about representing the condominium rather than educating unit owners before they sign on the dotted line. So I guess part of my other why was the reason why I'm here now at ALF and the initiatives that we're doing with condominium clients, because they really should be better informed before they sign on the dotted line. It's not I cannot stress this enough. You cannot go to a real estate lawyer to close your condominium deal. Because, as important as clear title is, there's so many more other steps that you need to take care of first before you worry about title. Because at the end of the day, title is going to work itself out. Yeah. It's very clear cut. There's a system. It's a whole thing. Yeah. It's the condominium area that's a gray area. You have to review the governing documents. Is it fitted for your family and for your lifestyle? All of the above. And they change from condo to condo. And even in our last episode, we had Fatima and Mohammed here from Vogue Mortgages, and they spoke about how important it is. And sometimes lenders will even not approve because a certain building has a certain reputation or it's being managed by a certain condominium management company, and it's just a no-no. So if the lender is saying no, they're not willing to take the risk, then you as the owner of that unit should also be aware of that and have the option to decide whether you want to take that risk on.
And could you imagine placing an offer on a property like that, not having the right advice?
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden, come time to close, and nobody is willing to offer you a loan on that property because it's got stigmas around it. Maybe, as you said, like sometimes it's the location. I had a client, they were looking for an investment property, and they sent me a bunch of condo apartments, and they really liked one. I'm not going to name the building, but there is a building that lenders will not approve. Like you have to have the 20% minimum down payment, because then it's like they'll approve it, but you have to have a certain requirement met, which is like the 20% down payment. Right. Then they'll cover the rest of the loan, but they're not going to insure your mortgage. Okay. Right. And they were really excited about this great price point. Clearly, I know why the price point was great. Right. And so it was like, listen, if you have the 20% down for this property based on the comparables that I'm seeing, great, because people are purchasing. It's not like people aren't purchasing, but these are the restrictions because of this building and the lender requirements, and you may not get an insured mortgage on this. So, exactly. That's just one example. And mind you, investors already have to have the 20% down. So there are also some cases where even with the 20% down, lenders might be very limited in terms of what they are willing to provide you.
Or altogether say no. Yeah. Or even worse, say yes. You don't have this information. The lender is saying yes. You get in and be in a situation that perhaps you might not be able to resell the unit in the future because maybe they won't issue a clean status certificate anymore. Maybe you're wrapped up in litigation and now you're out thousands of dollars trying to fund that process while also living in the environment that you are desperately trying to get out of.
Yeah.
So, I always tell clients that, do you want to spend a few $100s now and get better educated and know what you're walking into? Or do you want to spend thousands of dollars later and be in that type of a situation? So it's really, for me, it's a very clear choice.
Yeah.
But I think, I also understand the financial pressure of trying to save where you can and, properly manage your finances and where you're putting in that investment.
And mind you though, it can, for people who do have that limitation in terms of the upfront cost, because it does end up being a lot, right? Like all these closing costs. So the kind of advice that I give is, regardless of whether you're going with, a regular real estate lawyer or someone such as yourself who is completely knowledgeable about all these different documents that govern the condo, it also depends on the condo that you're planning on purchasing.
Exactly.
Right? So there are some great buildings that have a great turnover, great location, like so many units sell there. Like and it's based on being boots on the ground that I see which buildings are good. And I've already read the status certificates of those buildings. And so in that sense, it's like, you know what? Here are my recommendations of lawyers. You choose what you're comfortable with. These are the pros and cons for, or the risks associated with going with this lawyer, and this particular lawyer, but going with someone who may not go over all of the documentation with you versus someone who would. Just kind of like, you take it as it is, but I've looked at this building myself. I've done my research, so this is as far as I'm going to go in terms of my advice, and now it's up to you to figure out what you're comfortable with.
So we all know the market has changed significantly. What kind of conversations are you now having with your clients?
So, great question. Overall, yes, there is an overall sentiment of how much this market has changed. It's not the way that it was a couple of years ago. Even, month to month, we see several differences happening. Everyone's kind of like confused depending on the areas that they're working in. What I typically like to ask when somebody does ask me, how's the market, or what are you noticing in the market? I say, which market?
Right.
GTA is massive. You've got Halton all the way to Durham to Simcoe, and all of these areas are different and they work differently. So yes, overall, we're noticing a lot of changes, interest rates after being at a lull for so long, we're starting to see them decrease. So the conversations that I'm having with my clients, majority of them are first-time buyers. I don't see the market picking up the way that media portrays it to be and the rumors make it to be. The whole the rates are decreasing and then bam, prices are increasing, so you better get in now. It is that sweet spot right now where we still have so much inventory and at the same time rates have decreased. So it is a sweet spot. I don't know how long that's going to last. I really don't know. But the conversations with my first-time buyers right now has been a lot of it's been a lot of consultations and a lot of prepping. And they're not still feeling like this rush. They hear these rumors about, oh my goodness, the prices are going to increase, the rates are dropping, should we buy now? And I kind of just have to take them on their own journey based on their own goals for their first purchase. And then we determine, after everything we've discussed, whether or not it does make sense for them to buy right now, or if they can wait a little bit later, depending on what that difference looks like for them. So yeah, that is kind of the conversations that I've just been having with people about the market. It is different. Of course, it's so strange. There are units that we see that I don't think are going to sell, that I think are going to stay on the market for a longer period, and then they sell within like a week's period. It makes no sense. And then there are homes that I think are going to sell right away just based on the way that they show themselves, the location, and they're sitting on the market for a lot longer. So all of us are kind of just in this phase where we're like, what's happening? But we're also monitoring and we're looking at these patterns and figuring out what kind of conversations to have with our buyers. But yeah, depending on if you're looking in Durham or if you're looking in Toronto or you're looking in Halton, my conversations with them are very different.
And I'm so glad you said that, because there's no clear-cut answer or clear-cut statistic for one size fits all. It really, and obviously we do this on the legal side. we do, obviously, everything is on a case-by-case basis. Depends on what the unique factors are, and they could be changing. There could be something that you're not even thinking of, and we'll ask because maybe in a past case it's come up, it's new, or it's something that nobody has ever thought about before, and it needs to be asked now.
Yeah.
So I agree, and I'm happy you're giving that advice where you're really assessing it on a case-by-case basis, because one size fits all is just not. So I guess since we're on this conversation, I know your Instagram reels are amazing. They're so informative. And I know you talk a lot about MOI. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so months of inventory. I look at months of inventory on a monthly basis because it's a really great way for me to have conversations with my clients to get a sense of where we're currently at in the market for their particular needs. So months of inventory, you're just looking at, basically the calculation is how many months is it going to take for all of these properties that are on the market to sell if no new other properties entered the market. How many months would it take? So typically we look at, the 1 to 3 month period is, it's a seller's market. And then 3 to about 5.5 month period, it's a balanced market. And then anything over 5.5 months is a buyer's market. So it gives you an idea like, oh, this is where we're headed. So I did some MOI calculations for July and for August, and I was monitoring, and I'm sharing this with my clients. And I'm like, guys, look at what's happening. And it's not one size fits all. I'm breaking it down. So if I'm looking at condos in Toronto, I'm only looking at condo apartments, not condo townhouses.
Right.
And then separating it from condo townhouses to freehold townhouses. Like, I'm really breaking down the calculations for each. I don't have my numbers. Actually, I could pull out my numbers if we have time.
Yeah, of course.
And so I wanted to just give you a quick example. I'm not going to go through all of the different calculations that I did earlier, but September, for example, condo apartments in Toronto, the months of inventory is 7. Very well a buyer's market. But semis are 2.91.
Wow.
That's a seller's market, right? And then just for comparison's sake, I looked at Oakville. And I looked at the condo townhouses in Oakville, for example, which was 3.95, and in Toronto it was 6.5. But semis was 6.
Wow.
So still like right on the cusp of that buyer's market. So you just see again, like, how's the market doing? Well, which market? Which type of property? Which area? But yeah, so I love calculating that, and I post it on Instagram too because I want to show people what's happening on a monthly basis. But outside of that, it's a conversation for me to have with my clients because I'm monitoring how things are going. And then it's also an opportunity for them to see whether they should jump in, depending on if it makes sense for them, or whether they should hold off.
And that's a great way to do it. And of course, none of us have a crystal ball. So it's not like you're going to be looking at everything, even if you're doing all of this work, which you are, which is great. You still, as you said, are not able to pinpoint and say, this is what's going to happen. Yeah. But I guess if you were to look at it from all the knowledge and all the research that you're doing, where do you think the market is heading?
Oh, geez. Great question.
No pressure.
I know that there's this frenzy out there about interest rates dropping on a consistent basis now. Like 2 days from now, we're expecting another drop. And we're expecting a major one this time. Not just 25 basis points, but 50.
Right.
I don't know, again, if that's going to happen. But chances are, a lot of economists and mortgage agents, again, are saying it will. So let's say it does, right? We're already going to be down to the prime rate of 3.75, whereas we were 4.5 earlier in the summer or something like that, right?
Yes.
So interest rates are a big factor. And I get that that's going to drive people out now to increase their affordability. But in terms of prices immediately going up, I don't know if I believe that right away, just because of how much inventory there is in the market. First, we need to eat up that inventory. Right? And then I think it will happen. I just don't think it's going to happen as quickly as everyone's expecting it to, especially with, the winter months being slower to begin with. But hey, I could be completely wrong. But that's just kind of where, looking at the data from the last couple of months and a few years back as well, and now looking and kind of seeing the projections for the next couple of months, that's just, and conversations that I'm having with industry professionals too, that's just kind of where our head is at, that it just, we are seeing more activity now. Buyers are going to more showings. Buyers are doing more consultations with people. I'm having a lot more consultations than I did in September and August. So I'm seeing a lot more of that happen now.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing it transition into sales right away. So people are starting to get ready, but we're not seeing a transition in the sales stats right away. Do you get what I mean?
I fully understand. And we actually had this conversation in our office a few days ago. It's so funny how things used to be so clear cut. There was like a spring market and a fall market and this, it was just so, and now it just feels like there is no, like none of that exists anymore. I also feel, people are moving a lot more often, whereas maybe a few years ago it was so, let's move in August before the kids start school and we know they're going to start JK or whatever in this school and go on till grade 8, and we sort of have a break and building that home and just staying there and then moving on to the next one. I do think people are moving around a lot more often, and especially with newcomers coming in as well. I don't think these things are as common sense in other areas of the world or even exist.
To kind of like piggyback off of what you're saying, interest rates are just one factor in how the market is affected. There's also other things like immigration being huge, demographics, and employment rate. So this wasn't a client of mine, but I was working on a transaction with another agent. I was working for the buyers, and so I'm talking to the seller's agent, and I said, I see like it was sold. It was not even conditionally sold. Like, you guys actually sold it. I see the sold price.
Okay.
Why is it back on the market? Like, I'm curious. And she said, the buyers, literally a couple days before closing, bought a car. And then their lender didn't approve them, obviously, because like, yes, you have the financing approved, but they're still waiting until closing to make sure everything is finalized, right? So yeah, they bought a car. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh my goodness, how? And it was financed. Like, they financed a car right before closing.
I know.
And the deal got botched, and they had to, sign a mutual release. And the sellers are still going after them.
Of course. And that's the unfortunate part of things. And now imagine you're a newcomer and you find yourself in that situation. I just wish that people get the right team from day one, rather than, and of course this is our industry, but people always come to us in a crisis. But if only you had received the right advice from day one, you would have saved yourself all the headache and being in a crisis. So now imagine if those buyers had received the right advice from the right team, that would not, most likely, that could have been avoided.
And it sucks for the sellers too, because now I saw exactly how much they sold it for. And unfortunately, they were in more of a, desperate situation as well. It's just, the whole situation, I felt so bad for them. It sucked.
I know.
Yeah.
And it just really makes you think about what can really be avoided with just one simple conversation.
Yeah.
So you and I have worked on a couple of condo deals now. And obviously the first step to the condo deal is a status certificate. Tell me a little bit more about the types of conversations, or at what point do you talk to your clients about this unique document, about this unique unit that they're going to be buying?
Yeah, so typically my process, sometimes it differs depending on where the clients are coming from, how they reached out to me, but typically I do a buyer consultation, and I have a very separate buyer consultation just for condos. And so in that consultation, I've already embedded the status certificate review as part of the conditions, and just in very generic terms, what the status certificate entails. So right off the bat, before even signing with me, before even looking at properties, they already know that there's an additional step when it comes to purchasing condos.
Right.
And that there are a lot of different documents like the governing docs, the bylaws, the rules, regulations, and then obviously the status certificate with the financial health of the condo. So all of that gets shared in advance, so they understand that this is not only an additional cost in terms of closing costs, but also an additional step that is like so significant. It's so important. So yeah, they already get the consultation in advance in terms of what that status certificate is and how to prepare themselves when it comes time to actually place an offer on a condo.
Perfect. Well, Mina, thank you so much. We could probably talk about this forever, but thank you so much for coming in today. And if I'm sure you're going to get a lot of requests about all the great work that you're doing. So how can our audience reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active.
Yes.
At Realty Mina, REALTY Mina. And I did start a YouTube channel. So funnily enough, we're talking about condos. I had a lot of questions from buyers about condos and what the offer process looks like. So I actually have a posted video on like a screen sharing video of the entire agreement of purchase and sale for condos. So you can check me out there as well. It's just, the YouTube channel is just at Mina Naseem. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by ALF LLP. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. This is a kind reminder that our content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute as legal advice. Every situation is unique. So if you need legal support, we encourage you to book a consultation with one of our lawyers on our website, alfllp.ca. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. For more engaging conversations, expert insights, and practical advice, follow us on social media at @ALFLLP. That's where you can find our podcast, Law That Leads. Thanks again for listening, and more importantly, drive safe.